There's this moment that happens for a lot of homeowners. You're just living your life, paying your mortgage, and then one day it hits you. The house you live in is actually worth a whole lot more than you paid for it. Suddenly, it's not just a home, it's a really valuable asset. And that realization, well, it naturally leads to a really big question. If all that value is just sitting there tied up in your property, is there any way to actually use it without having to sell your house? Can you turn that on-paper value into cold, hard cash? The answer is a huge yes. And today, we're going to break down one of the most popular ways to do exactly that, the cash-out refinance. Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to tackle this in 4 parts. First, we'll talk about the whole idea of unlocking your home's value. Then we'll get into the nuts and bolts of how a refinance actually works. After that, we'll run through a real-world example so you can see the math in action. And finally, and this is probably the most important part, we'll talk about how to use that equity wisely.
So, first things first, unlocking your home's value. Before we can do anything, we have to get our heads around the single most important concept here, and that is home equity.
So what is home equity? Well, to put it simply, it's the part of your home that you truly actually own. You just take the current market value of your house and subtract whatever you still owe the bank on your mortgage. That difference? That's your equity. It's your financial stake in the property.
And this equity of yours, it grows in 2 main ways. The first is pretty straightforward. Every single time you make a mortgage payment, the amount you owe goes down, which means your equity goes up. The second way, which is often way more powerful, is when your home's value goes up. Whether the market is hot or you've made some nice improvements, that appreciation gives your equity a direct boost.
Okay, so we've got the concept of equity down. Now, let's get to the main event, the cash-out refinance. How do you go from having this value on paper to having spendable cash in your bank account?
Right. Now, this is the most critical thing to understand. A cash-out refinance is not a withdrawal from a bank account. It is a brand new loan. What happens is a lender gives you a new, bigger mortgage that completely pays off and replaces your old one. Then, that leftover money, the difference between the new big loan and what you owed on the old one, is yours. That's the cash.
I know that can sound a little complicated, so let's try a really simple analogy. Imagine you buy a fantastic bicycle for $100. You love it, you ride it all the time. So a few years go by, and it turns out your bike is now a hot collector's item. It's worth $200. Now, you don't want to sell it, but hey, you could use some cash. So a friend lends you $120, using the bike's new, higher value as security. You get the cash, and here's the key. You still own your bike. A cash-out refinance works on that exact same principle. We're just talking about a house instead of a bike.
And this isn't some brand new, trendy financial product either. The modern cash-out refi really has its roots way back in the 20th century. Institutions like Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac were created, and they helped make the whole mortgage market way more stable and predictable. That whole process of standardization is exactly why this is such a common and accessible tool for homeowners today.
All right, that's enough theory. Let's put some actual numbers on the page and see exactly how this all plays out. Time to do the math. So let's imagine a family bought their home a while back for $400,000. A solid price for their area at the time. Fast forward a few years, the neighborhood has really boomed, and now their home is appraised at $600,000. That's a whopping $200,000 in appreciation alone. And of course, they've been chipping away at their mortgage all this time, so their remaining loan balance is now down to $280,000. Okay, now here's where it all clicks into place. Lenders, they're not going to let you borrow against 100% of your home's value. They need a safety net. A really common limit is 80%, which is called the loan-to-value, or LTV ratio. So let's look at the math. 80% of that new $600,000 value is $480,000. That's the absolute maximum for the new mortgage. From that amount, you first have to pay off the old mortgage, which was $280,000. And what's left over? That $200,000. That is the cash that goes straight to the homeowner. So you get this check for $200,000. It's fantastic, but this brings us to our last and honestly our most critical section, using that money wisely. Because this is a financial tool, it's not a lottery win. Now, people use this cash for all kinds of reasons. Some of the most common and strategic uses are things like home renovations that can actually increase the property's value even more. Or maybe paying off that high-interest credit card debt that's been hanging around. Some people even use it to buy an investment property or fund something big like a college education. But, and I really cannot stress this enough, it is absolutely critical to remember This is not free money. It's debt. You now have a larger mortgage balance. That probably means a higher monthly payment, and your home is the collateral for that bigger loan. This is why it's so helpful to think about this as a choice between an investment and an expense. Using that money for something that's going to build long-term value, like those renovations or an asset that generates cash, or getting rid of expensive debt, that is often a really smart financial move. But using it for short-term spending on things that just lose value, well, that can create some pretty serious long-term risk.
So to wrap this all up, the core idea behind a cash-out refinance is actually pretty simple. It's just a way to turn an illiquid asset, that's your home equity, into liquid cash that you can actually use. It lets you tap into the value you've built up over years without having to sell the place you live.
Like any powerful tool, it can be incredibly helpful when you use it wisely, but it can be potentially dangerous if you don't. And that really leaves us with the final question you should be asking yourself. Is your home equity an asset you want to build with, or is it a risk you're willing to take? Understanding that difference, well, that's the whole ballgame.